people get it? Why don't they just get with the times and realize that if they don't hop on board right now, they're going to be left behind? You may think I'm talking about a variety of issues that face us today, but no, ladies and gentlemen, the few of you, I'm talking about this radical tool called the internet in the 90s. You see, back in the day, technology and internet was known as the playground for nerds. Except back then, being a nerd was not cool. They usually weren't on a stage like this. In fact, they were usually outcasts, outsiders. But businesses were starting to get a little worried because the nerds were taking market share. And I was one of those nerds. Yes, it's tragic, but I was. In the 90s, was part of a young group of eager, clueless people out of college, tasked with teaching older people how to use technology. And we were sequestered in this room by ourselves called the e-business team, and we had radical ideas like teaching our general managers to turn on their computers, showing them how to send messages not via dictation, but via email, and the hardest one of all, buying things for your wife on the internet. Yes, these were globally challenging times, and we were the front lines of innovation and change. And that might sound really silly now, but there are so many parallels to e-business and technology as it existed in the 90s, and impact investing and access to capital as it exists today. And although we've dropped the E in e-business, we still have a lot to learn from impact investing. So for those of you who are like, what the heck is impact investing? It's really simple. Don't pay attention to all the gobbledygook. It's literally, I expect my capital to have both a social and environmental and financial return. The reason why this room and everyone should care is because impact investing has the power to transform how we look at and how we deliver capitalism. But it has a lot to learn from technology and internet in the 90s. And I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret. I can see the future. I really can. And there are 3 trends that are telling me right now that impact investing is here to stay. The first is that there is $30 trillion of wealth changing hands from an older generation to folks who care about making sure that their money does well and does good. In fact, an article by Forbes said these investors are predominantly, you guessed it, women. And these women investors not only invest in other women-led businesses, but they also are more likely to invest in businesses that create social impact and social outcomes. The second trend is that 66% of consumers are more likely to pay a premium for things that do well and do good, which means it makes good business sense. Once again, a predominant segment of this population is women. And lastly, millennials demand, not expect, demand that they are working in roles that do well and do good. In fact, 77% of millennials say, if my company is out there not just doing no harm, but not actively supporting and creating and improving the world we live in, I don't want to be a part of it. So these 3 trends are driving impact investing. But unlike dropping the E in e-business, we have to be really careful not to drop the impact in impact investing. And there are a couple of lessons learned we have from the 90s in technology. The first is the stodgy folks who were talking about turning on their computers back in the day were so obsessed with creating what already is just online that they didn't think about what does it look like to create something that doesn't exist. This is a chart just of businesses from 2009 to 2015 that are $1 billion. And there's some old stodgy ones that started, in 2006 that are also $1 billion. Who the heck was going to sleep in beds with strangers? In fact, don't tell me that's your business, but who was going to go an Airbnb back in the day? Who felt like they needed to spend all their time spending 100-some characters telling about what food they ate? But this is what's driving our economy now. And the folks back in the day were not visionary enough to imagine a world that was not just an acceleration of what is, but a creation of what is not. Impact investing also has to not just be about making capitalism a little better, but imagining a world where capitalism is a world that we want to be a part of. And because they were not mindful of what is not, and instead so focused on what is, they ran into some problems with things like this grandfather company that was started in 2004 around the responsibility of the new technology and solutions they were bringing. And so for Facebook and other social media companies, not to single them out, it's about security and privacy. But for impact investing, it's about how are you making sure that as capital flows and changes hands to things that we care about, we're not actually perpetuating the very disparities we espouse to despise. So what does it take to do that? What does it take to make sure impact investing is actually a tool that we can wield to improve capitalism? The first is emotional intelligence. I know it sounds really straightforward, but for some reason we've figured out in the last couple of decades that capitalism means, forgetting the golden rule. But what does it look like to actually invest and embed emotional intelligence and how we generate profit and return socially and environmentally for everyone? The second is equity. And no, even though I'm talking about impact investing, I'm not talking about taking stakes of someone's company. I'm talking about getting real about the suppression and oppression of the talent of women and people of color that have existed in this country across generations for too long. That is not just our responsibility. If we do not make sure that we are mindful of that in impact investing, then you cannot call it impact investing. Now, that might seem really heady, but there's only a few cultural mindsets, just a few, that we would need to change to get that to happen. The first is to switch the mindset of capitalism from scarcity to abundance. Everyone talks about the dog-eat-dog world, and I've got to beat you before you beat me, and I've got to be on the top of the pyramid. But actually, when you come from a spirit of abundance, you realize that you can grow the pie and not just fight over the crumbs of the pie. A great example of that is Basecamp. Basecamp is a project management software platform. Their CEO does not allow their employees to work longer than 40 hours a week. He does not look at time as a scarce resource. He looks at time as something that people have to use to live their life in abundance. And they maintain thousands of clients and are completely successful because instead of looking at the scarcity of let me punch your card and let me track you, he recognizes that people need to live full lives and an abundant clock is more important than punching it. The next cultural mindset that we would need to change is shifting from the hero to the community. I love these trees. They're redwood trees. And the reason why I adore them, first of all, they give you perspective because you feel so small when you're standing in a forest of them. But the other reason is the only way they grow so tall is because all of the roots of the trees connect to each other. The tree next to you holds you up and helps you reach your highest height. If companies and capital that flows to companies is mindful not of the heroic, often white guy in a basement, going and solving the world and starting a business, but instead thinking about the community that is inspired and impacted by that business, capitalism can be completely different. A great example is Athleta. Their whole mission is about the power of she. They have a rabid consumer base, and it's because they have Athleta ambassadors that are normal folks like us who talk about what their brand does, not just to make them look cute, although it does, but because they use that as a fuel, as a power, as a source of what women and girls can do in the world. Athleta wouldn't do that if they were just about themselves. They have to do it through a community authentically. The last cultural mindset to shift is from competition to collaboration. Now, I know these ants look really big, But this is like the difference of me like going from here to there in a single bound. I actually am pretty short and I couldn't do that by myself. But a chain of us working together towards a shared outcome can actually make the impossible possible. You only move to a place, though, of collaboration when first you have the first two principles, but second, your mission, your goal is not about eating the other dog food for competition, but about the outcome that's bigger than yourself. An example is Griffin Hospital in Connecticut. They used to be the worst hospital in that region. But they turned and transformed everything around, not by trying to pull patients from other hospitals, but by saying our enemy is actually the way healthcare is done. When you are working together to collaborate around an outcome bigger than yourself, you can transform and garner resources in ways that are actually inspiring and impactful. So those are the three cultural shifts that we need to make in order to make capitalism a force for good. You need emotional intelligence. You need a responsibility for equity. In short, you need CAPEQ. So what I ask you is, what's your CAPEQ? What are you doing every day to make sure that you're shifting from a competitive mindset to one of collaboration? How are you lifting up the community instead of singling out the hero, superhero? How are you making sure that you're thinking about the world as you want it to be and not the world as it is? That's the only way we can make sure we never drop the impact from impact investing.